So, I'm going to talk about pagodas, and I'll give you a short excursion into the imbricated meaning, or the meaning that's sort of built in and interleavened. As we are all old students here, most likely all had the benefit of having meditated in the pagoda. And this is a relatively new experience, because say about 100 years ago, it would not have been possible for larger groups to meditate together in a pagoda. Why is that? Because traditionally, pagodas were and are solid structures. But a little bit more about that later. Pagodas are commonly made from bricks, and the shape develops from a broad base up to a slender spine, and culminates in the diamond bud, a precious stone right at the top. The size of the base of the pagoda roughly corresponds to its height. Now, if you think about the bricks representing humans, this shape then corresponds to the conditions here of life here on earth, where we have a large mass of suffering people, and as we make our way along the path and up the structure, we gain insight and eventually liberation from our suffering. But more about that a little later as well. Historically, pagodas were structures to remember and to pay tribute to important and significant figures. The remains were burned and the ashes buried under a mound and was then covered with bricks or stone. I imagine it would look like something like the structures shown in the picture there. During the Buddha's time, according to a story in the collection of the long discourses, the Nikaya, while the Buddha was staying at the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi, people used to come and pay homage, donate alms, flowers, and so on. However, sometimes the Buddha was absent. So Ananda Pagoda, the donor of the Jetavana monastery, requested the venerable Ananda to ask the Buddha for something which represented him, so that the people could pay respects on behalf of the Buddha to it. In response, the Buddha gave permission and allowed the construction of pagodas for people to pay homage on behalf of himself. According to some very early Buddhist sources, the Buddha, when asked what such a structure should look like, demonstrated the basic shape. He folded his robe on the ground, placed his begging bowl upside down on it, and his staff on top of that. After the Buddha's parinirvana, his relics were enshrined by 8 kings who laid claims to the relics in 8 stupas. Those stupas were in Rajgiri, Vishali, Kapilavatthu, Alakapa, Ramagrama, Pava, Kushinaga, and Vetapida. The Pimpra stupa at Kapilavatthu apparently was the first one to be built. The word pagoda comes from the Pali word meaning Datugava, meaning a place to enshrine relics of the Buddha, a place to worship or a place to pay homage. It doesn't always need to be a pagoda. It can also be a place under the tree, like here at the Mahabodhi temple, where King Ashoka placed a stone slab to mark the place where the Buddha meditated. It's just a look at etymology of the word, from Datugava to pagoda, from stupa, puto, from Sethiya to Seti. Of the Buddhist pagodas, The biggest and most popular amongst the 84,000 pagodas that King Ashoka built is the Sanchi Pagoda, which we see here, which Patrick already mentioned. It's in Madhya Pradesh in India. It's a brick monument with the lower part a hemispherically shaped dome, wrapped an arm's bow. The middle is a square box shape, and the top is a vertical pole with 3 umbrellas. It is surrounded by a wooden fence, enclosing a path for the ceremonial clockwise circumambulation of the pagoda. Pagodas may take many different forms and shapes, and the ones that I'm focusing on in this talk is mainly the Myanmar style pagodas, many of which can be seen in Bagan, in Myanmar. Bagan is an ancient city and a UNESCO World Heritage Site by the Irrawaddy River in the Mandalay region of Myanmar. It was the capital of the Bagan Kingdom, which unified the regions that would later constitute Myanmar. During the kingdom's height, between the 11th and 13th century, more than 10,000 Buddhist pagodas were built. Today, over 2,200 survive, and it really is a most worthwhile site to visit if you ever get the opportunity. The Ananda Pagoda, which is one of those that are still there, is an exquisitely designed and crafted pagoda based on a perfectly symmetrical plan. Some pagodas are so well and precisely crafted that there are no visible mortar lines between the bricks. As you can see, it was not a totally solid structure, but it had internal access ways that led to a chamber with statues of the 4 Buddhas looking in the 4 cardinal directions, and you can see a number of narrow passageways and some larger anterooms where individuals or small groups could probably sit and meditate. The Shredalong Pagoda in Yangon is perhaps the most famous of the Myanmar pagodas. It is said to contain the relics of the Buddha, the last 4 Buddhas in fact, and is said to have been built while the Buddha was still alive. It is surrounded by many shrines and smaller pagodas for prayer and rituals, and it forms part of a large pagoda complex. Two merchants, Kapusa and Balika, encountered the Buddha at Bodh Gaya, where he was enjoying the bliss of his newly found Buddhahood. They offered him rice cakes and honey, and in return, the Buddha taught them the Dhamma. In doing so, these 2 merchants became the first lay disciples to take refuge in his teachings. The Buddha then gave them 8 strands of his hair, with the instructions for constructing a stupa to enshrine them. The 2 merchants then presented those 8 strands of hair of the Buddha to King Okalapa, who enshrined them along with the relics of the 3 preceding Buddhas, Kakusanda, Kunakaana, and Kassapa, in a stupa on Singutara Hill, the current Shreveport Pagoda. Now, Botagang Pagoda, which is about 3.5 kilometers southwest of Shreveport Pagoda and means literally 1,000 military officers. The Botagang Pagoda marks the spot where the merchants arrived by boat at the docks in Yangon, and 1,000 military officers formed a guard of honor for the relics to be brought on land. The Botagang Pagoda, therefore, is as old as the Shreveport Pagoda. and it contains one of those hairs as a relic inside it. During World War II, Pagoda was bombed by the British when they were bombing the Yangon dots and destroyed. However, during the rebuilding, it was discovered. They discovered a 6 by 6 by 1.8 meter big room inside, and that room then contained another room within which was another one, and from the 6 by 6 meters, finally they came down to a 20 by 10 millimeter little gold encasing in which was the relic of the Buddha. This casket that had the relic, when the pagoda was rebuilt in 1948, it was not rebuilt as a solid structure, but a hollow shape from reinforced concrete. And therefore there now was space in the middle to actually display that relic. And it is not buried underneath or inside as it was, but in the Buddha pagoda now it is on display. And there are zigzagging passageways around it, so you can walk around it and circle under the relics. Now, a few years later, having been instructed by Ledi Sayadaw to teach, Sayagyi Uba Kim built his pagoda at IMC in Yangon. In his construction, Sayagyi implemented one significant change from the way the pagodas were historically built. His pagoda had 8 meditation cells arranged in a circular pattern around a central cell. This central space used to be where traditionally the relics of the Buddhas were enshrined, or images or statues of the Buddhas would be on display. However, in this pagoda was where Sayagyi himself would sit and meditate. The clock of Vipassana had struck, as he said, and with it he transformed pagodas from places of worships, ritual or prayer into a place for active practice, with him at the center, a living and breathing Vipassana teacher, instead of an image or a statue of a Buddha. So it was him there. Later, when Goenkaji started to build the pagoda at Dharmagiri, he modeled it on Sayagyi's pagoda. And here we can see Goenkaji and Mataji walking around the pagoda construction site at the time. Goenkaji, however, expanded the number of cells. And nowadays, it started off small, of course, with just a few cells, but now there are several hundred cells in Dharmagiri, and it expanded, and I think it's 300 or 400 cells today. Like Sayagyi, Goenkaji would also meditate in the central room of the pagoda, where historically the relics have been enshrined. The largest pagoda in modern times is the Global Vipassana Pagoda in Mumbai. It was conceived and realized by Goenkaji, and it is based on the Shrelgon Pagoda. But out of respect, it is about 30 centimeters lower than the Shrelgon Pagoda. And it is to pay tribute to Myanmar, and this technique has been kept in its pristine purity for the last 2,500 years. It is the largest unsupported dome in the world today. It's about 86 meters wide, 27 meters or 26.5 meters high. And it has enough space at its vast dome for about 8,000 meditators to meditate together below the enshrined relics of the Buddha above. It's an incredible achievement and testament to the now revived and actively practiced method of Vipassana meditation as it was taught by the Buddha and made available to householders full Sayagyi, spread around the world by Goenkaji, and now available to us here. How good is that? And here you can see the relic chamber above, in the center of the dome, in which the meditators were sitting. And this is a view across the water. When you arrive by ferry, you see it like this. Now, the Senshi Pagoda was a very famous one. And in Sitaku International Buddhist Academy in the Saikame Hills near Mandalay, in Myanmar, there is a pagoda based on the Senshi Pagoda. It's paying tribute to the Vipassana technique being brought from India back to Myanmar. And it's paying respect to the Senshi Pagoda in India. And the Global Vipassana Pagoda is paying respect to the Shwedagon Pagoda in Myanmar. So what we've got here is an example of monumental storytelling through architecture. Historically, there were 4 different kinds of pagodas permitted by the Buddha. The Dhatu Seti, a pagoda in which the relics of the Buddha are enshrined. The Paribuka Seti, a pagoda that the utensils of the Buddha are enshrined. The Dhamma Seti, a pagoda where Pali textbooks and commentaries are enshrined. And in Bodhisattva Seti, a pagoda where images and symbols of the Buddha were enshrined. And since Sayagyi Upa Kim, there's now a 5th type of pagoda, Vipassana Pagoda, where we can meditate together and through our practice pay respect to the Buddha. At the beginning, I indicated the imbricated meanings, and now just briefly tell you what the shape of the pagoda represents and means. It reflects a journey from suffering to liberation. The base, that's right at the bottom of all there, represents blind suffering, ignorance, and dukkha. The square terraces, which form the 2nd layer, present the cause of this suffering, which is craving, aversion, and ignorance. The octagonal terraces, which come afterwards, represent the initial steps on the Noble Eightfold Path and a growing understanding of the true nature of the 3 causes of suffering. Here one begins to understand that there is a way out of suffering. The bell, which is the middle part, is a prominent part of the pagoda shape. It represents an upturned alms bowl. The 3 bands around it present the fundamentals of this path, which are Shir, Samadhi, and Panna. The inverted alms bowl, of course, is a very serious symbol because the bhikkhu's very life depends on it. To turn it upside down is a rejection. And in this case, it means rejecting the unrestrained pursuit of sensual experiences and creating new suffering, new sankharas. It signifies the attempt to change old habits of blind reaction through a thorough understanding of impermanence at the level of body sensations, that is sampajana. The 7 bands which follow the bell shape represent the 7 factors of enlightenment. Then comes the lotus structure, which is made of 3 parts. The lower lotus represents the stage where one is still capable of creating new sankharas, but like a lotus sitting above the murky water, the roots are still attached to the bottom of the pond. The necklace, the orbs, represent an important transition point. The Nibbanic experience, the transcending of mind and matter. The upper and flowering lotus indicates that the meditator is still in the central field, but is no longer able to create new sankharas, to result in a birth in a lower plane. Like the lotus sits above fetid water, the Vipassana meditator or the Vipassana yogi is still connected to the word, but the roots are more connected to the bottom of the pond. The banana palm, banana bud. A banana tree can give fruit only once. This section represents the stage where the meditator has reached the point where all sankhara are eradicated. They have reached the summit, the stage of Arahant, when no new birth is possible in any plane of existence. This is also where the brick construction of the pagoda begins. The umbrella, the ornamental umbrella, represents the crown of human experience and achievement and sits on top of the entire edifice. The diamond bud, which sits on top of the umbrella, signifies the total eradication of all defilements through enlightenment, the ultimate goal of the purification process. So this is what we see in the structure outside our pagoda and the others that we talked about. Here we can see a close-up of the lotus section, and here we've got a drawing of the Dharmabhubi Zedi. The shape looks seemingly simple, but is a very detailed and highly complex geometry. And here's some drawings about the future shape of the entrances, and you can see the Zedi in place, and the two entranceways with the smaller Zedis on top. And I've just shown you a couple more slides of the making, where you can see the parts, the molds for the plants being constructed by the workers in the factory, and the components for which it has been assembled, and the careful work that has gone into creating it, and how they sketched and created the whole thing. And here we've got it in the factory in Melbourne, about to be shipped here and installed outside. Thank you.